what's on your mind? He recently told me about an officer. We both worked at Orange County at one time together. I don't recall the person, and we're going to keep his name confidential, respect to him and his family. Um, just committed suicide, and we understand that the pressures of job, family, environment is very serious. And Kev, talk to us. Tell us what's going on with you.
Okay.
Why did that affect you so much?
Well, I'm going to because it's not new.
It's not new.
It's not new.
It's an ongoing event that
Yeah.
that needs to be talked about. That we don't talk about.
Yeah, and before we go on, we're not psychiatrists. We're not clinical psychiatrists. We're just actual people who are in the profession, and I don't think we get the conversation hasn't been had yet.
Right.
Because it's always the same thing. I didn't see it coming.
No.
What happened, or I can't believe that they did whatever they did. And this is from first story I heard in 1994 when I got hired of somebody committing suicide that looked like they had the world by the you know what.
Right.
And throughout our careers, I think we were actually talking about it before this show, like throughout our careers, in all capacities, like I said, whether you're in law enforcement, whether you're a firefighter, whether you're a fire marshal, it could be anything where you see like a nurse.
Right, nurse or EMT, paramedic.
Yeah. Oh, EMTs, yeah, forget about it.
Right.
But the difference is, I guess, how do you cope?
How do you cope?
And I'm going to tell you right now, back in the day, and I don't care how, I don't know, there's no such thing as, you had coping mechanisms, and they were normally drinking, women and or men, depending on what you were,
right,
gambling,
yeah,
and a dark sense of humor.
Yeah.
And those were your coping skills, and they still are.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, these days, a lot of those things were, at least they were legal.
Mm-hmm.
In today's society, there are also things that are getting to be taboo.
Right.
They're judgmental. You can't have a drinking problem.
No.
You can't be a functioning alcoholic to get to your problems.
Right.
That was a 70s, 80s, and 90s thing.
Oh, we know. I've seen functional alcoholics. Early in the game, there was a officer that used to come to work every day with, you could smell the alcohol on his breath. And I was like,
yeah.
And I was just coming out of the military. I was like, I came in, I was in the military in the late 80s, early 90s, and we were just getting into that era where you can't, substance abuse they were cracking down on that.
Right.
And being young, coming into, adulthood, I thought that they had all that stuff taken care of.
Yeah, no.
But those older guys and girls were dealing with things.
Yeah,
but they were trying to correct it so that we didn't have to deal with it.
Well, and we can call them unhealthy coping mechanisms by today's standards, but
right.
Back then it was just what you did. Like I remember my first year or two on the job. Like I met with one of my zone partners,
mm-hmm.
And he was sitting in a car looking kind of jacked up.
Right.
And I was like, dude, what's going on? He goes, oh man, he had saw like a kid get hit on a bicycle and died earlier in the day.
Right.
And you can tell it bothered him,
mm-hmm.
as it should. And my response, and maybe his supervisor and everybody else who kind of brought it up, was, yeah, just go home and have a drink. It'll be okay.
Yeah.
What else are you going to do?
Or here you go. We still see it to this day. The machismo.
Oh yeah, it goes without saying because you.
Yeah, you got to be tough.
Well, you didn't have a choice, and it's still, that stigma's still there today.
Right.
And actually, I'll tell you why that's there today is because you can't be, their whole perceived weakness thing, especially, it is morphed into women in law enforcement or that profession also,
mm-hmm.
not just guys, but that's just what it morphed into because you can't say there's something wrong with you.
Right.
I know there's a saying out there.
Put you on the bench. That's what you're worried about.
It's okay not to be okay, but in the real world, here's the thing. I go, hey, Charlie, I'm not okay.
Right.
And you go, Hey, Kev, I'm glad to hear that. Can you slide that gun and badge over
Yeah.
here?
Yeah.
And we're going to go ahead and put you at, what?
Out at the comm center.
Comm Center, Fleet, or
Right.
Evidence, or wherever. And we're going to just, we're going to take care of you.
But if we're dealing with the public,
Hey.
we're putting them in lakeside.
But check this out. So now whatever problems you were having, whether it was marriage or
Right.
financial. So what happens when they side it around you like that? They take you off duty.
Take your off duty.
So
everything's
now
shut down.
that's your income that's
Right.
also being affected.
Right.
Say your problems were financial.
Right.
Did that help?
That did not resolve the issue.
Okay. And say it was relationship problems.
Yeah.
Did it help to put you on the sideline and in your own personal well-being? What happens when they put you on sidelines like that?
Shuts you down, man.
No, it may shut you down, but what happens around you?
Oh, now you're being stereotyped by your colleagues.
Or you can say stereotype, but maybe they're stereotyped also because you can't talk to them.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to talk to them. It's like you're
that's
damaged
good.
goods.
Now you're damaged goods.
Yeah, you're
Right.
isolated. Nobody, hey, did you hear what happened to Charlie? And
Mhm.
I can't call you
Yeah.
or anything like that. Just
You're told sometimes not to call the person.
yeah. And the same goes with if you're under investigation,
Yeah.
whether it's sustained or not.
Same rules do not apply to being investigated for misconduct acts and comparing that to he's having a crisis in his life.
Right.
And he just need help. He or she just needs help getting through it.
Yeah, it's like to ask for help like that.
Mhm.
And I know, there's discrete programs and all that, but it all depends on how bad it is.
Right.
Because ultimately it doesn't help you, so it's easier to keep your mouth shut.
Yeah.
Because I can't say, hey, I'll throw out, I won't throw out specific names, but I can't say, and I mean companies and whatnot, I can't say, hey, Charlie, I know you're having some mental issues and all this stuff. Go work your off duty at you insert name of theme
Right.
park or
Right,
grocery store or,
Yeah. Or event.
Yeah, it's like, okay, now, how do you navigate that and say we're going to take care of you and everything's going to be fine?
Well, it takes a strong manager, strong supervisor, strong friends, strong colleagues.
Bingo.
That's what it takes. You can't excuse that. And for anybody out there struggling with crises or issues, it's also their responsibility to speak up as well.
Yeah, but even though that is the hardest thing to do,
Right.
I'm not going to sit there and tell you that, oh, that's all because that is hard. That's something that needs. I think that's the real problem is that needs to be identified. Just
Right.
like the guy that you were describing, like, hey, I smell alcohol in that guy's breath.
Right.
There's been dozens of people like that have come through in the
Mhm.
28 years, and you know what? They literally had to be bad enough not to be able to operate a motor vehicle.
Yes. That's the only time that is addressed.
Yeah.
when you're about ready to destroy government property.
Yeah, but guess what? that person been coming in
Been doing it.
being a functional alcoholic from the 70s and 80s
Been
for
doing
years, and it's been there is such a thing as a functional alcoholic, and they will not cause any more damage than somebody who doesn't drink.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
why that's where that title comes from.
Yeah.
That sometimes they operate better.
Mhm.
You take the booze away from them, they might perform worse.
Yeah. Well, they said they'll have to start facing their reality.
Well, yeah, the reality is it's a profession, and once again, it's all encompassing when we say first responder. You have to know a hell of a lot more in 2024 than you did in 1994.
Mhm.
Look at it's one of those. The deal with the first responder title is that your job literally changes daily.
Daily, depending on first responder, it's changing daily because you're molding yourself into what the environment is, what's
Right.
going on in the environment.
Yeah.
If you're working, if you're not out there on the streets coming in contact with the public day in day out, then you got a little control over what your tasks are for the day. But if you're running from call to call to call to call,
Mm-hmm.
oh man, that puts some stress on you.
But you're playing the odds because look at what you have to know now versus even 20 years ago.
Mhm.
You have to be able to identify people's mental states,
Mhm.
what they have, what's the new catch title of this person's deficiency that you're supposed to assess in like the 20 seconds that you meet them.
Yeah.
You
Quick.
should have known. You should have known this. You should have known that. What's considered a threat?
Yes.
What me and you consider threats from our time is
Normal.
yeah. But now when I look at a lot of things that I see on the news and police videos and et cetera, so on, that I try not to get too engulfed in. But the reality is that you see a lot of people being afraid of things that maybe once upon a time, like, it's almost like they're being trained to, you're not being trained to assess a threat, you're being kind of trained to be afraid of a threat.
I want to say fear.
Yeah,
Be
and
fearful of.
trying to be
fearful
nice.
of. Be fearful of the people in your community.
Yeah, and I'm sitting there, I listen to all these things, and I've heard it for years. One of my, it gives me like, just chills when I hear somebody say, that whole, when somebody reaches in their pocket, it doesn't mean shit if you can't corroborate with something. Like,
Right.
he reached in his pocket, I thought he was going to kill me. I thought he was going to shoot me. It's like, you need more.
You need a little bit more.
When police stop having to articulate that, reaching in my waistband, and at one time we had phrases, he made a furtive movement.
Right.
Like,
Language.
yeah, that doesn't mean anything. Did you see a gun? You don't have to be shot, but you do have to articulate, like, the situation you're in, what's perceived, because now we live in a world, one time recently, this guy was being, a couple of cops are on him, and he's resisting, like,
Right.
literally resisting by not wanting to be handcuffed.
Yeah,
Not-
he was
not-
very passive.
Yeah,
aggressive.
not throwing and punching, and
Right.
we all know the difference with
Pulling
that.
away.
Well, what this guy did is he reached in his pocket, and to be honest, it's a different world we live in. There's a day where he just would have been shot because he was going for a gun, and you can't fault anybody for that. But what he was doing, what he was reaching in his frickin' pants pocket to text his girlfriend he was going to jail. That's the world that is ever changing, that
Right.
you can't just do what you did. You'd be in that exact same situation, but even though it seems the same, it's different.
Right.
And the reverse where that's happening, people have been shot. Like, it is a split second decision thing, but you do have to articulate whatever.
And we need more conversations like this among the troops, and I hope that that's what they're doing in the training academies and the blocks of training, monthly blocks of training, that not everything is a threat out there.
Yeah, and I fear that's.
But we don't want anybody doubting themselves when they're out there on the road either.
Well, there's a actually, it was a simulator exercise maybe a few years ago. It was
Shoot, don't shoot.
yeah, and it's like there was a guy that one of the scenarios, he was on the back of a pickup truck with a cinder block, and I don't know, we're from here to 20 feet, 25 feet away, and you had people actually pulling a gun on him, and it's like, in the real world that you live in, if anybody can throw a cinder block that far and hit me,
Sign them up in the NFL.
I deserve what I get. But that's not a go-to reaction, is to pull your gun initially. Why are you pulling your
You
gun?
back off.
Only because I asked the guy who was running the simulator, how many people do you have? Because I'm always that guy asking freaking questions. I'm like, he's like, yeah, we've had a handful. And I'm like, and there's always the younger generation. Like, dude, maybe it's just growing up that you never had a rock thrown at you, or somebody shot you with a BB gun or whatever.
I don't want to bag on the younger generation, but they're being exposed to, and not being exposed directly, but seeing more videos of incidents, and they think that that's always going to happen to them, and that's not your scenario. That's a scenario that happened to someone else.
Yeah.
But you have to be mindful that something like that could happen, but you have to be paying attention or be vigilant that things do happen, but make a good assessment. Make a good assessment at the time.
Yeah, but that's the way this generation is geared. Like, when they hear something, it's like, oh, that's the way it is.
Oh,
It's
everybody's throwing a brick center
yeah,
block.
yeah. It's like, no, it's
No,
going
yeah.
to be different every time.
Right.
You might have a guy that, like you said, can throw a hell out of a brick and kill you, but you know what?
But the average person is not doing that.
Yeah, it's like
That's 1 out of 10.
yeah, you can't just. It is not a generalized profession, and I think getting back to the topic of what happens to, and I'm just going to speak. I'm just going to speak cops, and
Right.
mainly because that's what I can identify with. Is holy crap, man! There's so much stuff that can happen, and you fix. Your mind is just used to fixing things and resolving situations, and when you can't resolve a situation, it screws with your psyche, especially when it's something that's happening to you personally.
Right.
Because you're ingrained into fixing problems, and any cop who's been around, trust me, your spouse is, don't talk to me like I'm somebody from work or whatever. You know, I know you've heard it 1,000. Everybody's heard that because you're programmed to fix a problem.
Right.
That's literally your job.
That's your job.
And when you all of a sudden like something happens to you, like, hey, well, I was 25. I'm telling people how to raise their kids because they're asking me. I'm telling them about how to go about their divorce or how to save their marriage. Now, I ain't never been married or had kids back then.
Now you're offering that assistance.
Yeah, so I'm into that, and that's the way it rolls. But
Right.
guess what? When at the end of the day, most of the things that we talk about is when people are having their own personal problems, whether it's relationships, drugs, drinking, stressors at work that they're too embarrassed to say I'm stressed at work or I can't handle this promotion kind of thing. They don't know how to deal with it because you're not trained to deal with your own shit.
I was just going to key in on that. You know, we know all the resources to tell somebody in the public where to go to, who to talk to. But we won't, when I say we, I'm saying collectively because both of us carry that badge. But we won't even use the services that we're offering. Like, you know, I don't know how many deputies where I knew that they were having issues. I worked on the critical incident response team for many years, and I was, you know, I was offered that opportunity, and I'm glad I took it. You know, for deputies in a crisis.
Right.
And one of the first things I've always offered them was the EAP program.
Mm-hmm.
You know, most agencies have a program where if they need financial assistance, temporary financial assistance, if they need to speak to a psychologist, if they need assistance with it could be in anything, you know, and some take it, some don't. I don't follow up. I offer it.
Right.
I didn't follow up, but I offered it, and I gauged the person that I came in that encounter with to see how they were doing. Every once in a while, I would, you know, notice that they're doing better, but if it's a repeat occurrences, I would ask them, did you check in on that? Now there was a few situations where we've had to pull people off the road.
Mm-hmm.
We've had to, you know, sideline somebody in operations.
But that's always a big deal.
It went there because now you're affecting your colleagues. Your actions are affecting your colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
And as a manager, you have to step up. You have to be that obstacle where you don't want this person to hurt, you know, folks that you're working with.
But look how bad that has to get before that happens.
But that's just, we just got done talking about it. I mean, that's just the way it is, because some people move like lasagna with their issues. You don't even know that they have issues until
like lasagna.
very, very quiet.
Wow. Let me write that down.
You know how lasagna's cooking in the oven, you don't even know it's cooking.
Man, that must be some Wisconsin stuff. I like it though. I'm going to use it.
But am I right though? You don't even know that they have
right.
an issue until there's an issue.
No, and that's what happens because it all like manifests. It's been, it looks like, oh, it happened because of this, but something's been going on for quite some time.
Right.
And you never know what it is because it's kept quiet.
Mm-hmm. It's kept quiet. And sometimes they've already gone to someone about it. And that's another thing, that if you know, we have to trust each other. I will never say, hey, look, you know, if you and I, if we're buddies on the force, and you're having an issue, and hey, look, man, you got to identify what's an issue and what's not an issue. You got to identify, is this issue going to affect the well-being of the officers that we work with? And it's your responsibility as a friend to say, hey, look, man, you told me something that is serious. I'm going to have to let our supervisor know about it, and that's the only person I'm going to tell about it. But you as a responsible officer, you have to make sure that everyone's protected. Do you agree?
I agree, but does it happen? Because that also puts a label on you too.
Well, I would take that label.
Well, you would at this particular stage in your career, but back then.
But as a 5-year deputy,
yeah,
5-year and under deputy,
5-year deputy,
it would probably, and that's the reason why I started up the show Shield Up, because there are responsibilities that when you're working in a profession that we're working in, or any profession,
right,
you have to honor those responsibilities that you signed up for.
Well, I try not to suffer from presentism, because because I just saw it on the news the other day, and I'll go back to the George Floyd incident, that
Right.
those 3 officers that were there,
Oh,
hey, I'm gonna sit there and say that if my FTO and I had 3 months on and my FTO was doing that, no, I'm not gonna tell my FTO what to do.
and I can say that I would probably, and I doing total recall. That's
You don't know.
It's hard to admit that you would probably be intimidated by that FTO.
You just got your job. You want to keep your job, and God knows what kind of groundwork he was laying down to put in your psyche before that happened. You're not thinking your training officer is going to kill somebody.
Yeah.
You're not thinking it. You're doing what you're told, and I can sit there now at my 28-year mark and go, yeah, that's not a hostile crowd, because I've been in a hostile crowd.
Hostile.
No, but when you get that stuff fed into you, you buy into it. Like they've never been in a hostile crowd. They've never been. If you saw how, I'm not going to harp on this too much, but it's just like the nature of the business. Like Floyd was a pretty big guy.
He was a big man.
Yeah, you know how hard it is to handcuff some uncooperative person that big.
We're not going to get into details of it, but was he hostile?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I submit to you that if he was able to be handcuffed, and
he was under control.
I looked at that video. Nobody was breathing hard. Nobody was stressed.
Yeah. They were just looking at the crowd.
Yeah. With that being said, and things that you know, and this is this is one other thing that you know from experience.
I throw the flag on it.
Yeah, when you have a guy, and this is kind of aggravates me about law enforcement, because they don't speak up. Everybody kind of disappears in the background. When you have a guy that big, and I know you have, because you've done a lot of fugitive stuff too. You have a guy that big, and he's handcuffed and he's laying on his stomach. You know how long it takes him to get up?
Yeah,
how much assistance does he need to get up?
Man, I need assistance just when we're doing burpees. So yeah, I know.
Yeah. Why are you on him?
Why are you on him? That dude's not moving.
Yeah. And it's like, really, it's like.
And plus, you know how hard it is to breathe on your stomach.
Yeah.
Your chest.
I used to do the role playing. This was like in my late 30s.
Right.
Do the role playing with the recruits, and they cuff you and throw you on your stomach. Yeah, dude. I thought I was in shape, but yeah, you know what? You can breathe. Breathing, I should say breathing is labor. I'm not going to say you can't breathe.
Your breathing is labor.
Yeah.
But with labor breathing comes panic.
Yeah. And because I know where I was, I'm not in panic mode. I'm very uncomfortable realizing that.
But if you're laying in the streets of State of Maine, at the corner of State of Maine, there's going to be some panic set in.
And somebody's on you, and you're geared up because you don't know what you did, and the concrete is freaking hot in hell.
In Florida,
yeah,
you ain't gonna be laying there long without saying, "Hey, can you move me off this ground?"
When you put all those factors together, I say that because we can sit here now and say that, but when I was a 3-month freaking recruit, those guys just got out. They did 3.5, whatever. Yeah. And you know what? You can't say. I don't want to say they deserve it, but you can't say that that's something that needed to happen, because ultimately just a guy was murdered in the middle of the street.
Mm-hmm.
And you can call it whatever you want, and he shouldn't have did this, because to this day, and I'm going to leave this subject in a minute, but because I don't know, to this day, was that $20 bill even counterfeit?
You know what that was?
Mention it?
To me, Dude, that was civil.
It was totally civil.
I wouldn't even use the energy on
28 years versus 28 months. I mean, and whatever this guy's deal was.
what is it, ran checks on the person. You don't got no wants or warrants. You want to file? Here, give me, come on.